As for tennis, we are going to be hearing a lot about the Australian Open. It hasn't even started yet. It feels like it's been going on forever. It won't start until the 8th of February. So as you know, and we were talking about it on the news round, some 1,200 people have been flown in for the tournament, players, support staff. Much of Melbourne, which has endured a long lockdown, not too impressed, not thinking that things should go ahead. So in effect, what's happened here is that positive cases on 3 of the flights in have forced 72 players into full-on quarantine. And we've been hearing all about it ever since. Christopher Clarey of the New York Times is with us. Christopher, how you doing?
I'm okay, yes. It's been a good day over here.
Well, I was going to say, I would presume you've taken a break from the situation in Melbourne to maybe sit back and enjoy a slightly less crazy situation closer to home.
Yeah, we weren't sure what was going to happen about 2 weeks ago. So it's nice to see it actually following the Constitution and going forward and all happening, and the transfer of power, peacefully happening, which is all reassuring to many people over here. And I'm an Irish American, so it's good to see another Irish American get his moment.
And a speech, actually, I've seen generally applauded and celebrated right across the board, Republican, Democrat, recognizing it was a pretty special effort.
Yeah, I mean, people who know Joe know he's not really a gifted orator. He's no Barack Obama in that department. But he really rose to the occasion. I think he showed a lot of passion and struck the right tone, which is one of compromise and unity in the country. So it was good to see and good to hear. And, that's today. We'll see what happens. Our recent track record as a nation has not been great. So
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah.
See how things go forward. But
If only,
optimism.
if only a speech could fix everything. So, the situation in Melbourne. Point one, if these 3 planes had arrived and everybody had been COVID-free, the players, the 72 odd players, wouldn't be in quarantine in the way they are now. Is that right? Is it ultimately the positive COVID tests on these 3 planes in which has forced them into the kind of quarantine they're in?
Yes, that's right. I mean, it was going to be a soft quarantine, if you will. That's the term that they're using. And they would have 5 hours a day outside of their hotel room. And the majority of the playing population still has this. 5 hours outside of your hotel room, a couple hours on court, a couple hours of gym time and training, some transport time, and a little bit of time for food. And that's what the majority has right now, but that's what everybody was hoping for. And I think some of the players who arrived and were not aware that if you ended up on a plane where somebody tested positive, that the whole plane was going to be hard quarantine, which means being put in your hotel room nonstop for 2 weeks. So it came as a surprise to a lot of players. Whether the communication was good enough, I don't know, but that's been the source of a lot of the frustration.
Not a pleasant surprise, and being in quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel room is no fun. I wouldn't envy it. And yet some of the moaning has not gone down well. How widespread has the moaning been?
It's social media, everything gets amplified, of course. So it takes, 5 or 6 people to do it to create this wave of opinion. So I think there's been a certain amount of it. And I think the real disconnect is maybe the players, one, not being aware this was going to happen if they ended up in the situation with the plane. And the way it was explained to me was it depended on how the plane ride worked out, how much communication was there between areas of the plane, which person tested positive. In one case, it was an airline flight attendant, I think, who tested positive. So that a lot of, obviously, movement throughout the cabin there. But I think that's certainly been the big problem. And I feel like the other disconnect is that a lot of the players, when they were last in Australia, it was a very different place. They're worried about bushfires, not a pandemic. And I think all of them haven't grasped until now just how much the population of Melbourne has been through. Should they have grasped that? Yes, but I think they've taken a little while to come to that realization in some cases.
Sports people often exist in a bubble, I suppose. Vanessa Sierra, for instance, Bernard Tomic's girlfriend, that was ill-judged, I think. I mean, I watched the full video and I wouldn't have said she was saying this is a disgrace and I should not be here and I need to be let out immediately. But certainly the tone of the video was, well, look how grim this is. And in the midst of it all, for instance, and some of the things didn't look great, like same bed sheets for 2 weeks. That's, not ideal probably, and you're eating on the bed and it's all a bit claustrophobic. But then at one stage she talked about how, look, I don't wash my own hair. It's not the done thing in my world, and I can't wait to get it washed professionally. And again, allied to your point about social media, that's gone from raising eyebrows to disdain to now full-on death threats coming her way.
I know. I'm not laughing for that. I'm just laughing at the state we're all in, and it does amplify everything. And obviously, she's not a player. She's part of Bernard Tomic's, team and entourage, girlfriend, and so it's not a direct criticism from a player or somebody like that, but it certainly has a big impact. And, the Melburnians have been through, what Australians have been through. You're not going to get much sympathy at all. And also, a lot of Australians are still trying to get home. They haven't been able to organize flights for people to get back who want to get back. So that's another aspect of this. So it's very important, I think, for the government to be seen as not showing enormous favoritism to the players as they come in, considering what their own population has been through. And I can understand that.
So come on in, Novak Djokovic. Now, in the haves and the have-nots of the tennis fraternity here, he is one of the haves. He has access in Adelaide to his 5 hours on the court, and he has a balcony, and his situation is tolerable enough. He wrote a letter to Craig Tiley, Australian Open chief, talking about things like, maybe is there a way we can move some of the players to private housing with access to tennis courts as opposed to the hotel rooms that they're in. Now, once, Christopher, this became reported as Djokovic demands, a set of Djokovic demands, as opposed to suggestions, he was doomed. And man, the pylon's been good there.
Well, Novak's had a tough pandemic in many respects in terms of the way he's presented some of the things that matter to him. He's obviously had a exhibition tour, maybe your listeners would remember, organized back in the Balkans last year, which really turned to vinegar because everybody tested positive and there was no distancing. It was just a bad look, which I think has partially recognized since then that it was a bad look. And he himself tested positive and spent time in quarantine with his wife, who also did. So there's a whole backstory here. I think the situation, it was not a demand. He knows Craig Tiley very well. He's won the title there more than any other man in the modern era. So he's a fixture there. And I think he was trying to play the role that he's carved out for himself in the last year or two, which is sort of the voice of the players and really the voice of players who are ranked well below him. You can argue about the motives. You can argue about the success rate of that. But it's interesting that a player in his position who doesn't need to do that has tried to reach out and be the voice for these players. And he's got a new player group that he helped start last year at the U.S. Open, and which is supposed to be the voice of these players on a lot of different issues and be their advocate. So I think he felt comfortable playing that role, and obviously it's boomeranged on him in a place where there are lots of boomerangs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kyrgios didn't need a second invitation. Djokovic is a tool, is what he said on Twitter. And then Djokovic responded to everything saying, my good intentions for my fellow competitors in Melbourne have been misconstrued as being selfish, difficult, ungrateful. This couldn't be further from the truth. And later on he said, I tend to ask myself, should I just sit back and enjoy my benefits instead of paying attention to other people's struggles? I kind of thought, maybe this is one instance where it does feel a bit harsh on Djokovic. As you said, Christopher, he's had a bad pandemic, the gathering and the scenes in the disco, and they've got their tops off like a bunch of idiots. And even, the Serbian chief medical officer asking him to stop talking about vaccines because you really don't know what you're talking about. Even pre-pandemic, Djokovic was just at a point with the public where not popular and seemed to rub people up the wrong way and just something not quite working between him and the public. What's your read on Djokovic? I presume you've had some kind of access to him here or there. He's an unusual character.
I've followed pretty much his whole career. I spent time in Serbia, in Kapaunic, the mountain town where he started playing the game. I visited the court where he started out. I've spent time around a lot of his family and people that are around him. He's a complex character and he's got a lot of great qualities. He's got a lot of, passion for what he does, and he's not afraid to go outside the usual boundaries. And this is, again, energy that a number one player in the world, traditionally wouldn't want to spend on these sorts of causes. On the flip side, he's, I think, a pretty stubborn person. He's somebody who also can be tone deaf. When he puts things out there, sometimes he doesn't communicate them correctly, so that he ends up having to post the message you just read from as an explanation for what he did. Obviously, I don't think he thought his letter to Craig Tiley was going to be leaked as it got leaked, but I think you need to be, in his case, very forthcoming about what you're trying to do, especially at this stage, and why you're doing it, instead of kind of let everybody else interpret it. So I think there's some lessons in terms of how he communicates, but he's also somebody who, both his style of play and his personality, it's a different vibe than Nadal and Federer, who are really the two people who dominate the men's circuit in terms of their influence. He's been in that third role for quite a long time, and I know at times it's grated on him. I think he's come to terms with it, but I think he's still trying to fight for his rightful place. And one of the things that really matters to him is this idea of representing the players lower on the food chain.
And would he be considered popular amongst players?
You know, I think with a certain population of players, the ones that, again, that are ranked lower, they see a lot of his efforts, and then a lot of them appreciate it. And I think to call him unpopular is probably too simplistic. I think he certainly ranks below Nadal and Federer, far below in terms of global popularity. But he has a very strong camp of people who do follow him and appreciate him because of, you know, what he's been through in his life. He comes from tough background, tough upbringing, and he's come a long way. And but he's not in any way that sort of crossover figure of Federer. It's not the same level that way.
As for the tennis itself, when it ultimately starts, and as I said, it's going to be the 8th of February, so we're going to be talking about this tournament for a long time. It feels like it's going to be a long old build-up. Djokovic, 8th Australian Open last year, as you said, record-breaking, and he's got ultimately, you know, top Grand Slam winner in his sights. That will, you know, for all the love for Nadal and Federer and the acclaim, if Djokovic finishes up top of the pile, that's some achievement. Medvedev is there in the betting behind him. Dominic Thiem, Nadal is there. Is this Djokovic's to lose once again in Australia, Chris?
Yes, just because it's his surface he's thrived on, and he's been the best hardcourt player of this era for sure. I would argue the big story really shouldn't be Djokovic. It should be Nadal. I mean, Nadal has 20 Grand Slam singles titles, and so does Roger Federer, who's not there. And Nadal's going for the record. Novak is still a few away. So I think that's where the focus should be in historical terms. But as far as you know, the favorite, I think you have to go with Novak and the players you mentioned, just based on the hardcourt prowess that Medvedev has shown, the form he showed at the end of last year. I mean, he's due to make a big move. Dominic Thiem also has showed some wonderful tennis on all surfaces, and except for grass probably in the last year or two. So yeah, those two guys are the ones to watch outside Novak and Rafa. So
Nadal and Federer are on 20 and Djokovic is on 17 and he's 33. It's going to be tight. Whoever comes out on top of this little joust, it's not going to be by much.
I agree. And it's amazing. You think about it. And I think it's not a coincidence. These three players have this drive and amazing ability, and they've all pushed each other. I don't think Roger would still be playing or trying to play now, come back again, if it weren't for the presence of Nadal and Djokovic and them having pushed him to raise his own game. And Nadal and Djokovic have talked about it a lot, about how much Roger set the bar for them and how their careers were conceived of differently and their games were structured in order to be able to last and thrive. And they've really been playing this game of keeping up with each other for over a decade now, and this is the result. But it is an amazing thing that they're so close, and they're the all-time leaders.
On the women's side of the draw, Naomi Osaka, who I saw had to delete photos of her enjoying a training session and having a grand time compared to those in the hotel. She's favourite, world number 1, 2 US Opens to her name and the Australian Open of 2019. So that's 3 majors, 3 Grand Slams, Chris, in 3 years. Is nobody else in the women's game is setting that pace at the moment. She's emerging. Is she as close to anyone is to being dominant?
You know, it's interesting. That would give the impression, if you read that out loud as you just did, that she's been a dominant force now, kind of taking over for Serena. But it hasn't really felt that way on the ground, because she's had these great moments she had that run where she won the US Open and then came back to win the Australian Open 2 years ago, and that was impressive. And then it's been very intermittent, her game. She could go on and off. Sometimes she's looked really impressive and on target and fit and really hard to beat. And other times she's very vulnerable. She lost at the Australian Open to young Coco Gauff, American teenager, last year, and one of the worst matches I've seen her play. So you don't know what you're getting, but based on how she handled the US Open, the political elements of it, plus the tennis elements of it, based on the fact that hard courts are by far her best surface, she hasn't really proven herself on grass or clay yet. I think she deserves to be the favorite. But then you got Ash Barty, who's had feels like a year off now. You've got Simona Halep, who's a fine player on surfaces, coming in as well, and you've got Serena still lurking in the background. So it's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, Sabalenka, I've seen a few people mention as big.
Yeah, Sabalenka has a power game. When she's on, she's irresistible, but she's very erratic, at least has been so far.
Right.
But she certainly has the game. If she catches on fire, she'll be hard to keep up with too. So there's probably 15 to 20 players who could win the women's title.
Naomi Osaka is one of the players on the women's side of the draw who has, I think, punctured through and been recognised by the casual sports fan. Who knows why these things happen, but certain players can, and she seems to have done that. Why the inconsistency? Has she given an explanation?
Well, I think she really is. I mean, it's a game that's played on many surfaces, as you know. You need to be a dominant force. You need to be an all-court threat. She really hasn't been on clay and grass, which are a part of the season. I think her game has been through the years kind of a low margin for error game. Low net clearance, a lot of power, really going for it when she's fit, moving well, and striking the ball confidently. That's been good, but when things go a little bit off there and the footwork isn't quite as good, she's suffered, and I think also had some injuries as well. And I think probably some things in her private life that have come into play. But the women's game is closer than it probably appears to those who think Osaka's taking over. I don't see her as a dominant figure yet, even though she has those 3 major titles. But she certainly is the personality because of her multiculturalism and the fact she played Serena in that crazy U.S. Open final a couple of years ago and won when Serena lost her cool. That elevated her, I think, in the public consciousness in a big way.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. That was the moment I think a lot of people saw her for the first time. Felt very sorry for her that her moment been spoiled by this nonsense on the other side of the court. Speaking of Serena, she is there. She's about 5th in the betting. What kind of shape has she pitched up in?
I haven't been able to see. I'm still in the States. I've obviously seen her in terms of the U.S. Open and in the end of last year. It was tough. She got injured in France, had to pull out of the French Open after just a round. So you just don't know with Serena at this stage how her body's going to hold up. I mean, she's 38 years old, a lot of miles on the odometer, but she's an amazing talent. And when she's on a hard court with that big serve and the ball striking is still there, you could see it at the end of last season when she gets into exchanges and she's able to get the ball in the right position. She can do enormous damage still. So she can't be ruled out. I think the odds are against her going 7 straight matches to win a title anymore, for sure, as what you just explained to me reflects. Fifth in the list. Yeah,
like she is just such a phenomenon and so remarkable. At 38 years of age, when she's won all that she has won, and as you said, the odds are now increasingly against her winning a Grand Slam, what's driving her? Like, what is driving this person who has nothing left to prove to anyone to pitch up in Australia, other side of the world? She's a mother now, loads of demands on her, and still she's going there, probably not to win. Given everything she's won, that's incredible.
Part of it is the way the world works now too. I mean, you use your sport and your fame and your approach as a platform. I know Serena has many things she's interested in, and tennis helps her reach those things as well. But above all, that isn't the most important thing. I think it just comes from within her. She believes deep down that she can still win. She'd like to prove it, especially as a mother. She hasn't won a major title since she came back from motherhood, and she's only won 1 title and was in Auckland last year. So I think she has something to prove to herself above all, not to anybody else. And I think also, her reference point throughout her whole life and her career has been her older sister Venus, and Venus is 40 years old and is still playing.
Yeah.
So I think if Venus had retired a couple of years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, as would have been probably the logical thing to do in some ways, we might not still see Serena on the tour. But now that they're both still there, I think almost would be surprised if they didn't go out at the same time and decide to call it a career at about the same time.
That'd be kind of a cool move, wouldn't it? Chris Clarey of the New York Times. Pleasure. Thanks so much for that. Appreciate it, Chris.
My pleasure. Good to speak with you.
Off the ball on News Talk. News Talk Breakfast.
She doesn't understand what is going on. She doesn't understand what COVID is. She doesn't understand why the school is open. We've had to tell her it's been cleaned.
Do you feel let down, Siobhan, when you hear that every other country in Europe has managed to provide this kind of education for children with special needs?
100%. These are vulnerable children. They have additional needs, and that needs to be considered.
News Talk Breakfast with Ciara Kelly and Shane Coleman.
In association with AIR.
Weekday mornings at 7 on News Talk.
At Volkswagen Financial Services, our solutions are expertly engineered to put you in the driving seat. Choose the flexibility of PCP, low-cost HP finance, or the convenience of leasing. Add extras like servicing and maintenance plans. For Volkswagen, Audi, Skoda, Seat or Volkswagen commercial vehicles, discover financing options that match your needs and your budget. Talk to your local dealer or visit vwfs.ie/affordability. Volkswagen Financial Services. Affordability engineered for you. Finance provided by Volkswagen Financial Services Ireland. Subject to lending criteria. Terms and conditions apply.
To keep well over the days and weeks ahead, it's good to make a plan. Keeping in contact with friends and family could be part of it. And in these times, a good catch-up over the phone can do a power of good. Make your plan today to keep well. Find more ideas at gov.ie/Healthy Ireland.
Banking on your bank always giving you the lowest loan rate? Well, think again. Spend less with Ireland's lowest rate on personal loans over €20,000 from Avantcard. With a loan from Avantcard, you could be saving thousands.
Apply today at avantcard.ie. Lending criteria, T's and C's apply. New applications only. Info correct 18th of January 2021. Source ccpc.ie. Avantcard.